Good. Hey, good morning, everybody. We're recording now. This is Steve Kapur, and I am a pilot and the marketing officer with the GEICO Skytypers. And this morning, we're going to be talking about the SNJ, which is the aircraft that the GEICO Skytypers airshow team fly for our performances. So let me switch over here, and we're going to go to the presentation now, and you're going to see my desktop. And let's see, here we go. The aircraft that we're flying, the SNJ, is one of the aircraft that trained the greatest generation of pilots, those that fought in the Second World War. We're going to let me start by introducing myself. As I said, my name is Steve Kapur. I'm a commercial pilot and a Skytyper pilot. I have the honor of flying with the airshow team, backseating for the lead, Larry Arkin, as a safety observer, and then flying for him for cross countries and whenever we do skytyping. It's definitely been a dream of mine to be able to do this, to fly air shows and to fly with these guys, who are some of my heroes. Um, but today we're going to talk first about the aircraft. The SNJ has a wingspan of about 42, almost 43 feet. The fuselage length on this aircraft is just short of 29 feet, and it weighs about almost 5,000 pounds. Seating on the aircraft is tandem, and that's because you have a student in the front seat normally. When the aircraft was built, you had a student in the front seat and you had an instructor in the back seat. Today, because the aircraft is flown primarily from the front seat, today most of our airplanes are flown, front seat only. This aircraft was called by different countries. It was called Old Growler by the U.S. Pilots. It was called Window Breaker in the U.K., probably because of the deep rumbly sound from the round engines. It was actually during the Korean War was called a Mosquito. It was actually used as an observer plane in the Korean War, and the SNJ, which is the model that we fly, is actually called the Jaybird. This aircraft speeds, it'll do 213 miles an hour true at 6,000 feet. It'll climb at 140 miles an hour. We come over the fence or we approach at 110. We fly the pattern at that speed as well, and it will stall clean at 74 miles an hour. It's aerobatic. You can do plus 6 and negative 3 Gs in this aircraft. And it's a very docile, very easy aircraft to fly when you're in the air. It's very stable. It is because of the way it's set up, the landing gear especially. It's what I would say is squirrely on the ground. If you think about it, you've got all that weight in front of the front wheels. And then instead of having a nose wheel, you have a tail wheel. So it creates a moment arm, as the physicists would say, and it wants to come around on you. It wants to that weight wants to work against you. So it's very important that you keep the aircraft straight and centered on the runway when you're landing or taking off. Its role in service. This aircraft was an intermediate trainer. Aviators would step into this aircraft from basic trainers, typically a steerman, the old yellow biplanes that you've seen in many of the movies, and then into frontline tactical aircraft. So if you were in the Army Air Corps, you might go from this aircraft into a Mustang. In the Navy, one of the Cats, one of the probably a Hellcat, then or maybe a Corsair. This aircraft was built as a low-cost trainer, and it has a lot of the handling characteristics of a tactical fighter. It just nowhere near the power that one of those aircraft would have. But it taught you to deal with some of the same handling characteristics that you experienced at a more extreme level in a Mustang or in a Corsair. This aircraft actually trained over 100,000 pilots during the Second World War from 34 different countries. And as I said, it was a tactical trainer. Pilots learned to strafe in this aircraft that actually had one gun mounted up on top of the engine nacelle. It was used to teach bombing, and also ACM or dogfighting. So did basic dogfighting skills. And it was also used to teach group tactics. Executing missions or pursuing objectives as a team rather than just as an individual. And then, of course, we talk about coming aboard the boat. This was the aircraft that they would learn to land on the carriers if you're a naval aviator for the first time. Now, the becoming a naval aviator or the path to wings of gold, the process is actually very similar to what it is today. Obviously, some of the lessons that are learned are a little more complex and a little bit deeper than they were then. But you start with basic training, just like anybody else entering the service. That's one common experience, that whether you're an infantryman or whether you're a pilot, you've had the same experience there. And from basic training, the aviators would move to pre-flight indoctrination. And that was largely classroom. That was things like aerodynamics, weather, navigation. They would move into survival training, which of course is outdoors in the woods. And if you're a naval aviator, there was also a whole section in swimming. And then from assuming you passed all those courses and did well, you'd move on to Navy flight school, primary. And there you had basic flight. You moved into aerobatics. You learned instrument flying, so flying in poor weather. And you learned formation flying for the first time. Also all very important basics skills. And at each of these sections, you're evaluated and graded, and the top guys move on. Next came intermediate flight, which you started to get into tactical operations, and finally advanced flight, where you were flying formation tactics. So again, prosecuting missions as a group as opposed to as individuals. And then the final piece was carrier qualifications. Um, and then from this program, you moved into a specific aircraft that you were tasked to fly. So you might move into fighters, you might move into sub chasers, you might move into attack aircraft. So teaching in the SNJ, the instructors at this level were dealing with students that already knew how to fly, at least basic flight. I guess they were probably less fearful for their lives, and more focused on actually helping the students develop these additional skills. So their focus was helping students learn, and they had certain standards of performance that the students were held to, that they needed to accomplish with an eye towards eventually their check rides. They were there to talk about safety practices and for accident prevention. And they would prepare students for their check rides, by giving phase checks and then recommending them for their check rides at each phase of their training. Now, the aircraft that we fly, let's talk about the Skytyper aircraft. The aircraft that we fly we have 5 SNJs in our group, and we have 1 T6. Number 4 is a T6. These aircraft were the basic trainers that we acquired through the years, and then have converted. We've added oil tanks for our smoke oil to these aircraft, and we've significantly upgraded the avionics and the navigation equipment in these aircraft. It's kind of an interesting contrast. I mean, these aircraft were built in 1940, prior to the Second World War, and yet, we've got color moving map, satellite fed weather, the latest Garmin GPS equipment, and most of their aircraft are all IFR certified or instrument flight rules. So these aircraft are kind of a dichotomy. They're the old and the new mixed together in one aircraft, which is it's interesting to me anyway. Skytyper training. Let's compare Skytyper training. Basically, we're taking accomplished aviators, men out of the service, and or accomplished civilian pilots, like airline pilots, And so, we're not teaching basic flight skills. What we're doing is we're providing first a transition into this aircraft, and that's usually the biggest piece to learn. Everybody today is learning to fly. The aircraft, the training aircraft, even for civilians, all have nose wheels. So that balance, that kind of actually unbalanced, if you will, feel of having a tail dragger is the first thing that they have to learn. And then the sequence in terms of getting to the airshow team, first, our pilots start out skytyping. And we'll talk about skytyping in a minute, but that's, kind of the basic level of formation that they have to have. And then once they're accomplished in that, and they're comfortable with the airplane, especially, as I said, takeoffs and landings, then they'll move into ferrying these aircraft. And so they're flying longer distances. They're flying, not all our pilots for the airshow team can be available on the ferry day. They may be flying, actually flying trips for the airlines. So we'll use pilots sometimes to help just ferry the aircraft to the show location. So these pilots then start to get experience in cross countries, longer distance flying, more formation. They obviously practice their formation en route, and landing at different airports, different environments. And then the last step is to actually, when a spot becomes available, to bid for a spot on the airshow team. And that whole training regimen is a lot more rigorous. We train every spring in Florida for a couple weeks. With combination ground school and actually in the air, and if you're transitioning onto the team, there's additional training hops that you'd be flying to transition on. The other piece, here's a piece that, we talked about the airshow team. Another thing that we, again, that's even first step is skytyping. And what I'm showing now is a picture of a skytype message, the word GECIO, which is our sponsor. And I'm showing a visual here that was developed to help pilots learn what the proper skytyping position is to fly in the formation. And so skytyping is a form of aerial messaging where we use a group of aircraft in a line abreast formation to type out dots in the sky that spell large dot matrix messages. These messages can be 1,500 feet tall, and they can be as long, depending on the complexity, they can be as long as 6 miles. So they're visible, since we do them at a very high level, we do them at as high as 10,000 feet. They're visible from 15 miles away. And it's a great form of interruptive advertising that we are among the only folks in the world that do this. These formations that we fly are basically 2 wingspans apart in line abreast. And if you look carefully at the lines on the aircraft, you see a white line on the wingtip and a blue line on the fuselage. And so what you try and do with, to get that position, the visual references are, have the aircraft that you're flying off of, basically be the size of your wingtip, and then line up those 2 stripes, the white with the blue, and that'll give you your fore and aft. The size of the aircraft gives you your in and out, and you're in perfect formation in this photograph. The other area, as I mentioned, are air shows. I'm showing one of my favorite pictures, which is our 4v2 cross, when all 6 aircraft are within a very tight area of themselves. And as I said earlier, this is an aspiration for a lot of our skytyping pilots as they work to get to this level. Let me say a word about giving back. We believe in this on our team. We recognize that we're blessed, and we're grateful to GEICO for letting us show these historic aircraft. I'm showing a picture here of a couple of us actually visiting Hasbro Children's Hospital in Rhode Island. We're grateful for the fans that come to see us, but we're also, we recognize that, giving back is an important part of having that honor. We believe in helping those that are less fortunate than us, particularly children, and we honor those that have served. So we visit children's hospitals, but we also have visited VA hospitals. If you want to learn more, I'm showing a picture of a book called The Incredible T-6 Pilot Maker. It was written by a couple friends of ours, Walt Ulrich and Jeff Ethel, a few years back. And it's a great book if you want to learn more about the aircraft. It's available on Amazon and eBay. And almost one, second to last slide here, I'm showing our links where our website is www.geicoskytypers.com. We're on Facebook at Geico Skytypers, Twitter at Geico Skytypers, Instagram Geico Skytypers, and YouTube Geico Skytypers. And so with that, I would open it up if anybody has any questions that they'd like. Okay.
I don't really have any questions, honestly. You covered everything that I would like to know about the aircraft and like what you guys do as a team, and it's actually very interesting. I learned a lot. It was really interesting, like how you uh, how you line up your aircraft with the other plane. Like that's actually interesting. I never knew that you try to make the other plane like as big as your wingspan. I like that.
Okay. All right.
That was really interesting to me.
Thank you.
And Steve, it's Jim. Steve, it's Jim Record.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, how you doing? Listen, could you talk a little bit about the maintenance that the Skytypers do, and also the safety aspect of all the maintenance we do?
Yeah, it's very interesting, Jim. The maintenance is actually performed. We don't have a lot of full-time guys on the team. Most of the guys kind of come in for the shows. The maintenance is performed by the only full-time employees we have. We have 3 full-time maintenance guys. They work on these 6 aircraft pretty constantly. They're either working on them at home or working on them on the road while we're actually out performing for different weekends. And they are probably one of the first and primary safety elements. These aircraft are very carefully maintained throughout the season. They go through annual checks, each one of the aircraft, where they're inspected to be sure that everything is still in compliance with the FAA regs and that they're safe aircraft to fly. But our whole focus on safety is part of our credo, and we start with pilot training and certification. From a health standpoint, we require first class medicals, which is unlike any of the other performers or teams are required to do, to make sure that our pilots are all safe and healthy. We train every spring. We do what we call spring training, where we do a couple days of ground school to review aircraft systems and make sure that we're fresh on all the information about the aircraft. We move from that into actually walking the routine that we're going to fly that season. We'll do nothing but a day of walking on the ground. And then we move into flying a couple hops a day for hopefully a week or so, depending on weather and timing and stuff. Where we actually build up, much like any of the other formation acts. We'll start simple, we'll do a couple maneuvers, then we'll start stringing them together, and we'll build up to our entire routine, which we'll fly a couple hops a day this last couple days, and then we actually move we try and move right from that right into our first air show. So the first show almost becomes like a dress rehearsal. So it's pretty thorough in terms of the training and development. And then, on site each day, we start each day together. Typically the guys will all meet for breakfast in the hotel or the BOQ, wherever we're staying that weekend. And we start moving into our sequence. And our sequence is a pretty disciplined flow of information and preparation that leads us to the point where we strap the airplanes on and fly. And it starts again with a morning briefing. On practice days, that briefing's a little bit longer because it's our first day flying and we're getting to know that particular show site. But it's at least an hour. As I said, on those days, it's an hour and a half. And then from that, often we'll walk the routine again, just as to kind of get that in people's minds. We'll do a talk through where boss will go through all his calls, radio calls through the day, and everybody will sit around the table and we'll click our pens to indicate we're turning the smoke on or off, and then we move into what we call sterile time, which is kind of the last 30 minutes before we fly. All the phones are turned off. We don't talk to people outside of the guys that are actually flying that day. and we kind of go off on our own and focus on the flight. And we start every flight with what we call a march down or a mount up. It's all part of our ground show. And from that point on, it's kind of muscle memory in terms of knowing what to do and how to react to certain calls and whatnot. So there's a lot of focus on safety, Jim. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good explanation.
Thank you. All right. So if there's no more questions, then I guess I'll go ahead and break it off. I just remind everybody, you can learn more about us by going to our website, GEICOSkytypers.com, or following us on social media at, on Instagram, on Twitter. We've got some great stuff posted on YouTube if you want to watch some videos of us flying or some of us talking about flying. It's all good stuff. And thank you again for joining me today.